And good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, 1 o'clock. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and welcome to Steel News. You know, there is something deeply broken in a system that tells a veteran, you look too disabled to work. But the moment that same veteran tries to help others, that very same system turns around and says, well, actually, you kind of look employable now. Well, Jeremy Harrell is a U.S. Army veteran. The VA evaluated him and gave him what's called TDIU. That is total disability based on individual unemployability. That means the government determined his service connected injuries were severe enough that he could not maintain a steady job. At the same time, he was receiving about $4,000 a month to survive in his disability benefits. But that didn't last. His benefits were later reduced and challenged because the government says he no longer met that standard. Why? Well, because while receiving those benefits, Jeremy Harrell built a nonprofit, Veterans Club Incorporated, helping veterans struggling with PTSD, addiction, isolation, even creating an equine therapy program where veterans work with horses to rebuild trust, confidence, and connection. And Jeremy did all of it for free. No salary, no paycheck. But that's not what the government focused on. They didn't ask, did he profit? No, instead, they asked, does this look like work? And that's the part that no one explains because TDIU doesn't prohibit activity. It doesn't say you can't serve. But if your life starts to look like you can work, you can lose everything. So now we have a system where a veteran who does nothing is considered disabled enough. But a veteran who stands up, serve others, build something can become a problem. Jeremy Harrell says that's exactly what happened to him, that the very thing that helped him heal became the evidence used against him. And while that's happening, massive veteran nonprofits are paying executives hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And they're calling that leadership. But Jeremy Harrell, he called it service. And for that, he was investigated, prosecuted, and convicted. So today, we're asking the question that no one wants to answer. Where is the line between service and a federal crime? And why is a veteran who serves without pay treated as a liability, while organizations that pay leaders to do the same work are celebrated? And in this case, chose to exclude Jeremy instead of supporting him. Folks, if this is a standard, it really isn't about income anymore. It's about how your life looks. Then every disabled veteran needs to know exactly where that line ends and certainly starts. We're going to be bringing Jeremy in here in just a minute because, Jeremy, you are, as far as I'm concerned, a true hero. You have absolutely exhibited all the hallmarks of somebody who has served his country honorably, going back into the Gulf Wars. You've come home. You wanted to get together. And you started something for veterans that kind of took off and became a sort of a life of its own. So thank you so much for being here. I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Ann, for having me. I really appreciate you helping me share the story.
Yeah. You know, and folks, if you have a second right now, please take a minute, get on your phones and start sharing this out. And please send this to any veterans you know, because veterans need to hear this story, because this is very much a veteran story, but it also shows a massive dysfunction in our government. And we're going to be addressing that today. Jeremy, you're a U.S. Army veteran. You were rated disabled by the VA, got a 70% disability rating. You then went on to start a little Facebook group that sort of morphed into something much bigger, and you founded Veterans Club Inc. You built this nonprofit to help other veterans, and you did it all without taking a salary. And your organization provides critical services and outreach and community for the veterans. You've even filed public tax documents showing that you don't take any money at all. And while this is actively operating, this entity isn't a shell. It's not a front, but yet you're being investigated, prosecuted, convicted because the government says your activity showed you are capable of working. What say you?
Yeah, you know, it's a hard precedent to set, to say that veterans who decide to get up and do something about the very same disabilities that they suffer with is criminal. In fact, to kind of summarize it, it's like peer support is a federal crime now, right? And I built this organization with two things in mind. Number one, I wanted to get better, the best that I could, right? I realized that they told me that this disability that I have is static, which means in disability terms, not likely to improve. They said that I was permanent and totally disabled. I don't know what that means to the listeners, but for me, when I hear permanent and total, well, I take it that it's likely to never get better. They said that I
Right.
wouldn't have any future exams. And so I decided to use the suffering and the struggle that I went through to help others that were just starting that journey. And again, it started as a social group on Facebook. I only wanted to get maybe 5 or 6 veterans together once a month to connect with our families, and then it just blew up because there was that much of a need in our community. And so, and throughout that process, we just continued to grow. We just continued to create programs that were highly effective. So much, in fact, that the VA, the Department of Veteran Affairs, asked me to be a consultant to their executive leadership team to help bridge the gap between the veteran community and the VA. So all this was a complete surprise to me. I'm actually doing what the therapists have asked me to do, to stay connected, not isolate, avoid suicidal ideations, and so on.
Sure. So the VA basically said you were unemployable. That's why they gave you the rating, the
Yes.
70% disability rating. This was also backed up by a treatment center in Atlanta. Uh,
Mhm.
this proves, walk us through what that means. What was the experience like when did you go to Atlanta and get this sort of backup to the original diagnosis you received from the VA?
Yeah. So just in my healing journey since coming home, I've been to about 12 different non-government organizations treatment programs, different nonprofits that work on post-traumatic stress disorder and other injuries, traumatic brain injury, and I've got great value. And so I was trying to take what I learned from these centers and then apply it in my own organization. Well, when I got indicted, and then went through the trial and got sent to prison and all that stuff. I got out of prison, and one of my conditions was to go and get involved in some sort of mental health treatment, right? And
Mhm.
so there's an amazing program in Atlanta, Georgia, called the Shepherd Center, and it's the #1 world-renowned spine and rehabilitation hospital and brain center in America. And so, I applied to go do that when I was on pre-trial, but because of the demand, I never heard anything back. But when I got, obviously when I got out, a couple months later, I got a call and said, "Hey, Jeremy, we have a place for you. We have a spot open." But it's important for people to know that because the demand is so high, in order for you to get accepted into this program, you have to do a several-hour evaluation before they ever say, "Okay, well, we think that this is something that you need." So that was another moment in where the validity of my disabilities come true. And so I went down to Atlanta, and I was supposed to go down there for 2 weeks to get evaluated. And so when I went down after 2 weeks, actually my provider, luckily for me, just happens to be a veteran. He was a surgeon in the Navy, but he's also the chief medical officer of that hospital. He said, "Mr. Harrell, due to the deficits and the severity of your disabilities, we're going to ask you to stay 14 weeks.
Wow.
And so when I hear that, obviously I'm ecstatic to get this kind of treatment, but I'm going, these are the same disabilities that were in question throughout
Right.
my whole federal trial that the government said that were overstated, that didn't exist. So it was tough to
Yeah.
deal with that
So
at the moment.
you are still of the mindset because of what you were told when you were given the original diagnosis from the VA. Don't turn into a hermit.
Yeah.
Stay engaged. That's why you started the Facebook page. You wanted to stay engaged and commiserate and just communicate and collaborate with other veterans that could understand what you're going through. It
Yeah.
turned into something where you found that you still could be a contributing, functioning member of society and giving back to others who are in the same condition. Yet the government responds, then you're not disabled. Yet you have this subsequent finding from this group in Atlanta that says, no, you're very disabled.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is the
And
system actually measuring disability or is it punishing productivity? Which is it?
well, it made me realize, and that I don't know that this indictment had anything really to do with my disability. I think it had to do with other things. It had to do with the fact that I was a highly sought out conservative Republican in Kentucky, who many people were trying to get me to become a state senator, and I was, of course, I didn't want to do that because I can't because of my limitations.
Right.
Um, but it was all over the news that they were trying to do that. Secondly, I was heavily critical on Biden's foreign policy and national security policies, and when they had to withdraw from Afghanistan, I was very vocal about that. and it went all over the country. The interviews that I did went viral about that, and I said it was the most botched military operation in history, and I still believe that to this day.
I
And
agree.
on the other hand, I was talking about how I appreciate President Trump for creating the VA choice program where veterans can go outside the VA to a private care to get the care that they need. So on one hand, I'm praising President Trump. On the other hand, I'm criticizing President Biden, and I think that was a big part of this whole thing. And unfortunately, when you are getting paid by the government, it kind of gives them an easy way in. The initial complaint was that people thought maybe that I was taking money from my veteran organization. And once they did a forensic audit that I wasn't aware of, they found out that
Hmm.
I hadn't taken a dime, probably less than any nonprofit leader in the country. And
Yeah.
so why didn't that close the case? But it didn't. They continued on, and they continued to try to find a way to do what they did to me.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
Susanna Stapleton agrees with you. She said you're right. She says
mhm,
you're right on that. It's really
yeah,
just such a shocking indictment of, well, first of all, the federal government, their behavior, the lack of clarity, and
mhm,
it's sort of rules for thee and not for me. So you have not taken any salary. You actually
mhm,
hired a director, yet the
yes,
government is calling you a paid director, somebody who's a paid salaried employee to do this. You are the face of it. You started this.
mhm,
You've documented your volunteer leadership in this organization. And yet the government argument is because your functioning is greater than the pay, you're acting more like a CEO. And this really kind of is the battleground, the intent versus the optics. So, try to help the audience comprehend why the government is making this argument that because you're doing media, that now equates to, well, you're really not disabled. So, therefore, we're going to go after you and throw you in prison. And we're also going to dock your disability benefits, despite the fact the government gave you that rating. And it was subsequently followed up by another NGO, a very highly sought
mhm.
after NGO to treat brain injury, et cetera.
Yeah. And so over 50 providers just in the last 6 years have said the same thing about me. My actual therapist at the VA happens to be the chief of their PTSD clinic at the Louisville Hospital. When he found out that I was indicted for this, he wrote a letter verifying and validating, my disabilities and the level of impairment, said that I was right where I should have been. And there was no concealment there. They alleged that I concealed my activities. I don't know how you do that when you're on the news every week and you're speaking in different speaking engagements, and we would have mental health staff retreats out at the farm for the VA mental health providers. They would come out to our farm, including my own therapist, right? And so I wasn't hiding anything. I just never in a million years thought that this would be criminal. In fact, I was following the advice that they had given me over the last, I don't know, since 2008, since I had been in therapy. But the title with the CEO, and I said this in my allocution statement to the judge, whenever you create an organization, and just for people who may not know, I don't own a nonprofit. No one does,
Right.
right? So it's not like Jeremy's Car Wash LLC.
Right.
So they could fire me at any time, really, if that was the case. And the fact is it's not just me running this organization. We have a board of directors. I have an advisory board of brilliant retired generals, colonels, and things of that nature. And we have a ton of volunteers. And again, a director of operations who does all the things that they alleged that I did. What I really did is that I went around and I spoke and I networked and I drummed up support for the organization, but I also systemically called out issues within our system. But I did that in a very professional way. I did that on Fox. I did that on CNN. Never once did I call someone out of their name, other than former President Biden, I guess. But no one in the VA system. The point was just to try to fix these things. And
Right.
what was happening is on paper, and I never should have been the guy that knew how to fix it. And so that created a problem, right? That I was getting in these rooms and people were asking me these questions that people have been trying to get in the rooms their whole entire lives.
Hmm.
And I was actually, what I like to say is I was actually crushing campaign points because we were actually solving problems. And so when I had the title of CEO, I had to do that for regulatory reasons. I had to have a
Right.
title. In fact, I did this work 2 years before we ever become a nonprofit because I didn't want the title. I was very outspoken about that. I want to be Jeremy. So anyway, That's where the title come from. Is I just had to have one. That's basically it.
So essentially, it sounds like the VA's Office of Inspector General,
Hmm.
who came to
Yeah.
visit you, are the people that have been following you, looking at your work across media, across social media, and
Mm.
seeing your organization. They showed up to your office after you were highly critical of the previous Biden
Mhm.
administration. Tell us about that experience when they walked in the door and who you thought they were and who you found out them to be.
Yeah, so a couple months after I made those statements about that military operation in Afghanistan, the investigation started based on the discovery. No surprise there. It went on, started in 21. They investigated. He said he followed me for over a year and a half, which, in my opinion, is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. All he's seen me do is help others not take their own lives and things like that. But nonetheless, when they actually come in the door, the funny thing about that is I had just come back from a 2 week inpatient PTSD TBI program at Emory University's Brain Center, another program down in Atlanta, because I have to keep getting treatment so that I can enjoy life to some extent, right? So I'm always, I can't advocate for people to get treatment and not do it myself. So I had just come back from being gone 2 weeks. We were in the conference room. I was checking in with my director of operations to see kind of what all had went on, and then these two gentlemen walked through the door, and they had normal clothes on. They look like veterans. And in fact, I know one of them is a veteran. And so when they come in, they just ask to talk to me. That's not unusual. And I'm always open to talking to anybody. We have an open door policy scenario there. And so they come in and we went upstairs and they started asking questions. And I realized very quickly that this wasn't a conversation, that this was more like an interrogation. I still at this point didn't know who they were, and they weren't forthcoming with their role and why they were there until I asked the question like, "Who
Hmm.
are you?" And then that's when they disclosed who they were, and they basically looked around and said, "How are you able to do this?" Which is a very broad question, with your level of disability. And I said, "Well, I don't have an intellectual disability, and because I can talk to someone while there's a camera doesn't doesn't determine my level of disability." And because I said, this is an area that I have lived through since 2003. So I'm sharing lived experience. I'm not getting on Fox and talking about that I had the cure to brain cancer, right? These are things that I have lived through. These are things that I have sought treatment for many years. And all I'm doing is paying it forward, helping others. So to think that I
Hmm.
shouldn't be able to do that is a little bit, asinine to me. And of course, they went back and determined that the day that I signed my initials on a DocuSign when we formed the nonprofit, they say that's the day where I no longer was an unemployable because I signed my initials on a DocuSign. And if that's the case, then nobody in the world is disabled, right?
That's exact the hypocrisy, the level of hypocrisy
Right.
that our government has risen to at this point is I don't even want to say it's comical and it's not sad. It's just absolutely blasphemous because
Yeah.
they say one thing and they're pushing you to do another. And they wonder
Yeah.
why suicide, veteran suicide rate is so incredibly high in this country. Well, if this is
Right.
how the VA treats people who have been badly injured, got a 70% disability rating, was had it confirmed, goes out and then helps other vets in the same predicament or worse, out of the goodness of your heart with no financial gain whatsoever, there's a real problem. I mean, the government is not here to help. I mean, Ronald Reagan hit that nail on the head, didn't he, when he said, I'm with the government, I'm here to help, run. So
Right.
really run. So you're not a big operation, but you've become critically acclaimed as a very good place to be. You have a
Yeah.
lot of support from the veteran community, and you've gotten a lot of media support because you're doing something that's so beneficial. Let's
Yeah.
talk about this organization, the Wounded Warriors Project. This organization apparently was also supporting your organization for a period of time. The difference is they have hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and their
Mhm.
paid executives get hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. They have a paid leadership structure. They have public advocacy for disabled veterans, which is great. And you compare that to yourself, Jeremy, where you take zero salary, you don't have hundreds of millions of dollars in receipts in the bank account for your organization, and your director, I think, makes just under $60,000 a year, versus
Mhm.
these other members in the leadership who are making hundreds, $300,000, $400,000 a year. Some of them also disabled veterans, I might add. Let's talk about the wake up call you got. I think it was just last Thursday or Friday when I got a text and a phone call from you.
Hmm.
Tell us
Yeah,
what happened.
so
What is it? What is
yeah,
this notice you got in the mail about?
yeah. So I got an email, and I hadn't seen it till now. It was actually an older email that I got while I was incarcerated, and it was from the Wounded Warrior Project, basically saying due to public records that I was involved in serious criminal, criminal offenses, and that because of that, I was no longer eligible for their programs. Now, I had been an alumni through Wounded Warrior Project for many years. In order to
Hmm.
become an alumni, you have to prove your disability, and it's not just hearsay. I had to send documentation from the VA about my diagnosis and things like that. Now, they didn't support my organization, but they supported me. I want to clarify that, which in turn supports the organization because the goal is to make me, be able to do these things.
Right.
And even my wife, as a married couple, we would go on these project odysseys and these things that they offer to help families who live with someone who are dealing with these disabilities. And with all that said, even though that I qualified for all these programs, to get a notice like that from the biggest veteran organization nonprofit in the country, who is probably the most well known, was heartbreaking, and it really just validated the reason why at our organization we have to continue to do what we do, the work that we do. And even though that we were small, and I think this was another problem, and even though that we were small financially, the most we've ever had in the bank is $400,000. We were producing results of a much larger organization because we made a lifestyle out of helping veterans. So I used to tell people this publicly, and I mean it to this day. Some people like to go to the beach. Some people like to go to the mountains. I like to help people who are hurting.
Right.
And while I'm doing that, I'm thinking, man, maybe I found the cure. This is helping me. So why in the world would I quit doing that? Right. So anyway, all that to say is that's what the Wounded Warrior Project, that's the email that I got. And you think about the millions of veterans that they serve. How did
Right.
what did they do? Sort through all those millions of files to just find mine? I mean, it just seems like it was very intentional.
It certainly seems like it because they feature a gentleman right here who has traumatic brain injury, Josh, and they talk about his journey from coma, et cetera, to where he is today. So clearly, they hold up people who have, similar injuries as yourself
Mhm.
that are rated, disabled in various degrees from, zero to fully disabled, as in yourself. Yet they found it in their heart based on a DOJ press release, predominantly, I think, right here that says
Mhm.
you were sentenced for theft of government benefits. And this is how the Department of Justice is basically characterizing you, somebody who was getting $4,000 a month. Thank you for your service, especially over where you were for
Right.
that period of time. And I'm sorry you sustained these horrific injuries. And I'm sorry for every single service member who's sustained horrific injuries, such as yourself,
Yeah.
or worse, they've passed away. This is, to me, such an insulting press release to be put out by the Department of Justice, showing complete, lack of respect for who you are, what you've done for your country, what you've sacrificed, and for $4,000 a month. To some people, that is a heck of a lot of money, and to others, it is nowhere near enough to survive for a family.
Mhm.
This is somewhere between just sublime and absurd that this press release goes out and they're claiming that you stole this money when they were the ones who gave you the rating. It wasn't like you walked in and said, "Hey, I'm disabled." They had to. That's a process. I know because I have a
Yeah.
son in the military and he's going through the same thing right now with the VA. So this has taken over a year. It wasn't like he just got type rated overnight. So
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah.
to me, it's just insulting. Very, very insulting.
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out. And the fact of the matter is they don't have an a la carte menu that a veteran can go in the regional office and say, hey, I want a little
Right.
bit of this and I want a little bit of that. It is a very extensive process. It is one of the most complex processes in the government. In fact, I mean, there was just recently an article in the Indiana Bar Association magazine about the complexity of the VA disability claims. It is a very secretive, very vague
Yep.
process, and you never really get face time with these people who are rating you. You never really know
Right.
who they are, and so it's already difficult in that way. But this is what they said I was. These are their doctors over the course of many years who rated me the way they did, who through these exams, other than the last one, which was manipulated by an overzealous agent. But who said the same thing about me. So even if they were upset about this situation, why wouldn't they hold their own doctors accountable then? I can't diagnose myself.
Right.
I don't know what's going on. I mean, I know that I have an issue that I'm dealing with, but I don't know the science behind it. And so, but they expect, veterans to know how to do all these things without any training. And
That's
it's
right.
just, and so when you look at that press release, it's very insulting. And in fact, it's very manipulating. And
It's
they
so
basically,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's so manipulating that you end up getting a letter like this from somebody who was one of your supporters of your organization. They supported you. And in fact, there was no discussion of your disability with anybody at Wounded Warriors Project. There was no case by case support. There was just a complete disqualification. So I guess the bigger question is, the Wounded Warrior Project they employ veterans, and at least one publicly combat wounded senior policy official is a member of the paid leadership team. So I suppose this is the question I have for them. Would those same individuals, if they were unpaid and outside the system, be judged too functional to remain disabled? I mean, this is the question that is on the table right now.
well, I can speak to that a little bit, and because we were in trial, luckily, one of my trial attorneys has an undergrad in mathematics. And when the VA's own expert was on the stand, he said, so if Mr. Harrell, because here's what a lot of people don't understand about TDIU as well, is you actually can make money. You just have to stay underneath the poverty limits for your family size, right? And so I think for me at that time, it was maybe $32,000. So he
But
used
just
an
stop right
example.
there for a
Yeah,
second. I want
sure.
people to hear what you said. Sure, you can get the veteran benefits, and you can be fully disabled, but you cannot go get meaningful other employment, because for them the poverty line is 32,000, and you're getting 4,000 a month, which puts you at 48,000 a year. Anybody with a family of four or more cannot survive on that. I don't care where you live. I mean, you just
Yeah.
simply cannot do it unless, of course, everything you own is paid for and you never have a broken car, you never have a hiccup, no disease, no nothing. You might be
Right.
able to scrape by on that today. It's gotten so ridiculously expensive right now. So they are the
Yeah.
arbiters of how your lifestyle should be. The government gets to pick and choose who you get to be financially as a man, as a provider for your family. Is that essentially what you're telling me?
Yeah. So with the full disability amount, additionally, I could have made 30 to 32,000. I don't quote me on that number, but it's around that number. I could have made that in addition to. And so my lawyer says, so if Mr. Harrell was a door greeter at Walmart for 7.25 an hour, which is minimum wage in Kentucky, and he worked 80 hours a week and he fell under that amount, would you all be investigating? Would this be a situation if that was the case? And he said no. And so my attorney's like, so he can't volunteer for no money, less hours than 80 hours, and now he's in federal court getting, convicted of a federal crime. And
Right.
it just goes to show the inconsistency of the process and how and it just really proves again and that it wasn't so much about this process, it was about me. It was
Yeah.
about who I was and what I was doing and the efficacy of what we were doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it comes down to. And the VA's responsibility, again, they gave the rating, they defined you as unemployable. They sent the system later sent somebody out to basically monitor your activity and contradict all of that. So,
Yeah.
did the system fail up front, or was the shift of the rules after the fact? Do you think?
Well, I think it fails on both ends. I think it fails up front because the precedent it sets is if we label you 100% or permanent and totally disabled, then you must stay in your house and you must not do anything
Right.
productive, right? And if you do, we're going to criminalize that. You're going to have severe penalties. Well, that doesn't incentivize getting better for any of these veterans. Um,
Exactly.
right? And on the flip side, you can do things, but if you cause too much of a stir, if you bring too much to light and you're highly public, well that's a problem too. And so where they draw the line, where the parameters are, who knows?
Right.
I know that this is the only case of its kind. If you go and look up similar cases, you'll find that the similar cases are cases where they had actual full-time jobs and they made hundreds of $1,000s a year while I didn't do that, right? So there's never been another case when it comes to volunteering.
Right.
This is the only one. So what does that
This
say with how long the VA's been functioning?
That's it says everything you need to know right there. Renee just says it's the same with Social Security, and now artificial intelligence is running Social Security. The facts are we the people are the beneficiary of the interest the agencies pretend we have to qualify for. We are the utility, for goodness sake. She's right. What she's talking about is the fact that we're chattel and we have agency government, which is not constitutional. It is a completely different system. And we're giving that very same system authority here. The U.S. military used to be, I mean, it still is a volunteer army and Navy, et cetera. But the way the Department of Defense has it organized is now falls under an agency, and that's a for-profit entity. And they're going to make P&L decisions based on whatever benefits them, not the veteran. And that's what we have to figure out. How do we get out from underneath that umbrella, out from underneath that system? So I appreciate Renee's comment. I think that's a very poignant one. One of the things that comes to mind for me, Jeremy, when I listen to you is if I'm a veteran and I'm a coach of my kid's soccer team, am I in jeopardy of losing my benefits? Maybe I'm 50%, 30%, or I'm 70% disabled, but I can help coach my kid's soccer team because I'm home all the time now and they don't want me working and earning a living. So I'm going to do anything else I can do to be involved. Should they be concerned about that?
A little over 2 years ago, I would have said no, Ann, but today I can't say that in good faith. And I do get those calls all the time. And in fact, what's really heartbreaking is I get a lot of these calls from 70-plus-year-old Vietnam veterans who are
Oh,
rated
God.
just like me, who say, I volunteer with the Marine Corps League, or we go and sell raffle tickets, or we set up these booths. Does that mean that they're going to come? I can't work. I'm disabled. Does that mean they're going to come after my benefits? That's a terrible thing. Like that is the opposite of what we should be doing to support our veterans. They should, if it's about saving money and things like that, the last people that you should try to use to save money are off the backs of our military service members, right? There's
Mm,
so much other ways to cut waste and cost, but you should never do it on folks within the military. And so you got these 70-plus-year-old men who are scared to death, who haven't worked a job in 40 years, who are now saying, Jeremy, are they going to come and so you have people who are like immediately the amount of volunteers that we had within our organization, because primarily it's these folks who are doing most of the heavy lifting within these nonprofits. Well, our volunteers, just dried up. All of a sudden, people were scared to go out and do it. They were scared to get involved. They were even scared to go get treatment because they thought if they go get treatment, then they're going to think, oh, well, you're better now, even
right.
though it doesn't work that way, right?
That's
Or
right.
if they give you a certain medication. So anyway, yeah, that's a very real concern, and I don't have a good answer because I'd like to say, well, no, that's ridiculous, but that's not the truth.
So it seems to me that we've created a system where the safest thing a disabled veteran can do is nothing.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it feels like to me. So if I had the government sitting in front of me, if I had someone on the next screen over next to you from the government, I'd want to ask them, where is the written line between volunteering and being criminally exposed? And was why was this criminal act, so to speak, not administrative? This is what I want to know from the government. And to the Wounded Warriors Project, who I do have an email out, and if I do get a response, I will absolutely read it on air because it would be a follow-up. I've asked specific questions about this case, but why exclude instead of support Jeremy Harrell? Does visible leadership disqualify a veteran from help? I mean, these are the kinds of questions I think we need to ask people. And to the Veterans Association administration, I'd say, what was the original rate? Was the original rating that you got, Jeremy, incorrect? Did they make a mistake, or did the rules change after the fact? I mean, these are the kinds of questions I think need to be asked. I think they should be asked in court. I hope your attorney asks the folks on the government side these questions because, frankly, it's just simply inexcusable, and they're leveraging an argument that is counterintuitive to the instructions that they gave you when they gave you the original rating that you're disabled and we're giving you a 70%. But don't withdraw, don't become a hermit, stay engaged. You're
Right.
acting and doing exactly what they asked you to do. And now they're trying to
Well,
call it work.
yeah, and I think it's important to say too, Ann, is during trial, my attorneys asked both the VA OIG agent and the VA expert, which is a rater who's been there 12 years, to ask them, is there anything that Mr. Harrell would have ever received that said he couldn't volunteer if there was a restriction on volunteering? Both of them said no. In
Isn't
fact,
that
the expert says there's nothing in our CFR process, nothing in our regulation that says the word volunteering at all. So how can you how can you say someone committed a crime for a rule that doesn't exist? They made this rule up for me, and as an effort to stop me. And I think that's one of the scariest parts of this whole thing. If they can do this to me, well, they can do this to anybody. And I
To the
think they
point.
used me as an example, right? I think I was an example. They knew they'd get a headline. They knew that
That's
this would
right.
be something that would draw attention. But I think it's actually going to backfire. The way that they thought that this was going to somehow, show that they're not putting up with any kind of fraud, waste, and abuse, which I am against fraud, waste, and abuse, and it's normal circumstances. But this is not what this is. And then to the other thing that you said is, I want to make sure the audience knows that this rating was given to me in 2011,
Yeah.
right? It's 2026. Well, over the course of time, just because I somehow learned to adapt and to try to, I mean, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I have 4 kids, right? So I can't just not do anything. So just
Right.
because I've learned how to manage it in a way that I can live doesn't make me better, right? And so I think
But
that's
you should
another
be
precedent to set.
celebrated. You're an example for everybody else that you're trying to
You
help,
would
honestly.
you would think that. You would think that. And that's what everybody's confused. That's why I had 200 plus people in the courtroom during my trial and sentencing. They had to live stream it in different courtrooms in the courthouse because people just couldn't understand this.
Yeah.
And people aren't buying it for the way that they present it in that press release that you saw from the DOJ.
Well, I can tell you, you've got people in the chat here in California. They're talking about those idiots in power are trying to I guess they're trying to do to Nick Shirley. They're trying to put him into some sort of as a criminal for exposing all the fraud in California. They're trying to pass a bill called the Stock Nick Shirley Act. I mean, this is where government is right now. We all know California is completely out to lunch. Thanks,
Right.
Kona, for that comment. Renee says they'd be happy to send something from our delegates for you, and just let us know. So Renee, how can Renee reach out to you? Jeremy, if you want some help, where's the best place for people to do that?
Yeah, so the best place is to email me directly. My email address is really easy. It's Jeremy Harrell 81 at yahoo.com, or you can send it directly to the organization at info@veteransclubinc.org, and then I'll be welcoming to get any kind of help and relief that we can get. So I appreciate Renee for wanting to be part of the solution and to help out. I appreciate that.
Yeah, really, it's just so beyond disgusting and shocking. There's one other aspect of this story that we haven't touched on, and it's your
Sure.
faith. Uh,
Yeah.
when you went to prison for 6 months, I'll sum it up. You had an incredible reception from everybody at the prison, the guards, et cetera. Nobody could believe that you were in there. They thought this was the most incredible, insane thing ever. And several of them were veterans themselves. They were just horrified at this whole situation. So you really, you had a very warm welcome. And they immediately asked you, you hadn't even gotten your cell yet. I don't even think you had your clothes yet. And they said, hey, listen, we don't have a pastor or a chaplain or, somebody that can provide services on Sunday. Would you consider it? Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so one of the other things I do outside the organization is I'm a rapid response chaplain for the Billy Graham Evangelical Association, which provides support to the folks at Samaritan's Purse and the victims of natural disasters all around the country and world. And actually, I went to Florida 2 different times while I was on pretrial to help. It's the only time I wanted to travel was to go down there and help them because they had been hit with back-to-back hurricanes, if you all remember that. And so I
Mhm.
went down to do that. And my faith is a huge component of what I do. In fact, I told the judge in the allocution, I said, my first responsibility is to love Jesus with all my heart, my mind, and my soul. And the second is to love my neighbor as myself. And that's all I was doing. That was the foundation of what I was doing with the nonprofit. And so when I got to prison, I walked in, and as soon as I walked in, there, you meet a CO at, the metal detectors, and he asked me, some questions, and knew that I was a veteran, and I said, yeah, I'm a veteran, and he asked me what I was in there for, and I told him, and his exact words was, "You got to be shitting me," and I said, I wish I was, otherwise I wouldn't have showed up here, and so we get through the metal detectors. I've never been locked up before. I still have never been in handcuffs. And the only thing I've ever had on my record and is a speeding ticket in 2008. So as we walk through this prison, I have a history of following rules, by the way, but as we walk through this prison, we're running into other correctional officers. Now, because this prison is also in Kentucky, a lot of the correctional officers are members of our organization. We have done stuff to provide support for them and their families. So they see me and they say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I guess they thought because I do prison ministry,
Right.
and I deal with justice involved veterans. I guess they thought maybe I was there on a tour. But nonetheless, I kind of told them what was happening, and as we're going through the prison to get down to change out and do all the things, everybody we ran into that was a veteran, the CEO was like, tell them, right? And so I'm telling this story, and nobody can believe it. And so, we go through this whole rigmarole, and I get over to where I'm going to be, and I walk in, and um, inmates have ways of knowing about people before they get there, and they come up to me and said, we know that you're a chaplain, and we don't have a chaplain here currently, and would you, be interested in leading Sunday services and Bible studies? And so the whole time I was there, my final sermon was actually Mother's Day. I did a Mother's Day sermon. We had over 40, folks that joined Sunday service, which in a prison of 200, that's a pretty significant percentage, especially in a
Mhm.
place that's as oppressive as a federal prison. But the point is, I spent all my time ministering to those men who had broken hearts. There were 12 or 13 other veterans in there. I would work with them, but that's all I really did. I mentored and I taught and I preached, and I just never allowed this to interfere with what God has called me to do. He says, no matter where I am, I am to carry the word and to share the gospel, and I did that unapologetically. And so if I ever had to find a silver lining in that, I would say that being able to minister to men who probably have never heard it, or likely have never been exposed to love that way, I think it was quite productive. And so yeah, that was one of the things that we do. And I'm still a chaplain with the Billy Graham Evangelical Association today. I just have had some restrictions that restrict on when I can travel and things like that. But hopefully to get back at it full swing here soon. I mean, that's
That's fantastic. I'm just going through your website right now while you're talking.
sure.
You are somebody who served overseas. You served honorably in our army. You came home. Were labeled disabled by the same, VA that services hopefully everybody to the best of their ability. Then you decided to expand that service after you had an incredible Facebook page, which started here, the Veterans Club. You wanted to have like 4 or 5 guys meet, turned into look 11,000 followers of people that got
Yeah,
benefits from having the camaraderie of for other fellow veterans, and to be able to connect and share stories, commiserate, celebrate, whatever it is. And that turned into an incredible organization that you still have, the Veterans Club, and you've now made this a nonprofit because you were basically talked into it. Hey, you should just do
yeah,
this. You're already doing it on Facebook. Now let's
right.
take it to the next level so you can offer even more services, to which you do. Equine therapy
Yeah,
is not an inexpensive proposition. It's why I don't own a horse. I just
yeah.
visit my neighbors' horses and I look at them and pet them and all that good stuff, but I don't have to pay for it. It's expensive. And this
It
is
is
a
expensive.
perfect application for a nonprofit to raise money. And you are a shining star, Jeremy. You don't even take a dime from this nonprofit, yet you're being condemned by the very government that sent you to war. Now that we
Yeah.
know, under false pretenses, under weapons of mass destruction. And now they want to destroy you because you're doing something good. Just
You
shocking. Of
know, and it's never been about the money. I feel like
course not.
if the Lord wants me to have a lot of money, he'll bless me that way. If he doesn't, he'll bless me in other ways, and he has. And although I haven't had much money doing what I have been able to do for veterans and first responders and their families, has made me the richest man in the world. And the amount of respite and relief from my own condition while I sat in front of these other veterans day after day. I mean, we would have over 200 events a year. I mean, there's only 365 days in a year. We wanted things for veterans to do on a Tuesday with their family that was free, and none of these things cost the veteran anything.
Right.
And so, sitting in front of them and being in community with them has done a world for me. It's made me a better husband, it made me a better father, it makes me a better leader, and I just don't understand how any of that could equate to a federal conviction, federal prison, and severe financial penalties.
It makes no sense at all, Jeremy, other than nothing that the government does makes any sense. It is absolutely counterintuitive to helping and servicing Americans. The very doctrine that our founding fathers created was our Constitution for us to restrict the federal government from overextending their power and raining tyranny down on us. And that's in fact what they're doing. They're doing in every aspect of our lives. And you are just yet another example in this incredibly abusive system, but we're going to fix it because we keep calling it out. And,
Yeah,
my organization, American Made Action, is very involved in actually attacking the very system that's attacking us. We're going after these
awesome.
agencies. because these agencies are nothing more than just a money laundering opportunity for them to continually attack and destroy. It's an attack vector. You're getting lots of kudos here, by the way. Kona says, thank you for your service, brother. We love you. God bless you. God bless your
Thank
family.
you.
You're a shining star in God's eyes. Isn't that beautiful?
Oh, it's very beautiful. I appreciate it more than
Yeah.
they know. And, the other thing is, with the current administration, I think I'm encouraged by the amount that they're trying to do to attack some of these things and to also fix what the last administration has done in this way. And so my hope is that they continue to focus on that weaponization piece, and they continue to focus on bringing relief to these folks.
That's
and
right.
I want to be part of the fight, but before I can be a part of that fight, and I think I can do really well at it, is that I need to have the relief myself first so that I can focus on others who have been hurt. And I'm more welcome to do that. So anybody in the administration that hears this, I want them to know that I'm eagerly looking for an opportunity to be part of the solution. So
I think you'd be a fantastic part of the solution. I think the VA needs a massive, massive overhaul. So to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, over to Robert Kennedy and HHS, the VA needs an overhaul, guys. And the two of them, I think, could really work together to sort of sort that out. But Jeremy, God bless you. Thank you so much for taking the time to bring your story to the public. I will follow up with you as I hear back from Wounded Warriors Project. I'm going to start calling. I've given them an email. I thought that was the proper way to do this and give them an opportunity to get a thoughtful response. But and as I guess Renee says, she just sent an email to you, to Jeremy Harrell 81 at Gmail. And let's see. Dora the Explorer says, we the people pay taxes every step we do for Washington, give to other countries. They take the benefits we pay since first day of work. She's absolutely right. Thank you, Dora. Could not agree more. Jeremy Harrell, thank you so much. Folks can find you on your website. Where else would you like folks to follow you? Because your website, veteransclubinc.org, is fantastic. Where else can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, they can find me on X at Jeremy W. Harrell. They can also same handle on Instagram and Facebook. And I would love to connect. Whether you're a veteran or not, I always say this, that veterans don't have a monopoly over trauma. So whether you're a veteran or not, if there's anything that we can do for you as an organization, or just me as a person, as a faithful man who's trying to be a light in this world, please get in touch with me so I'll see if I can help.
Okay, this is your X account. We just pulled it up. For those that want to follow Jeremy, please go ahead and follow Jeremy Harrell. Jeremy W. Harrell on X as well, Facebook, website, Veterans Club Inc. All these great places. Jeremy, always great to see you. Thank you so much for being here.
Too.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, folks, this isn't just about Jeremy Harrell. I think we can all agree. You know how I like to rail on the agency government. This is really about every veteran who comes home broken. Doesn't have to be that way. It really just doesn't have to be that way. But these veterans, they come home broken. They still want to be useful. Jeremy Harrell is that example right there. And then you have the VA that'll go ahead and tell them, well, you're disabled. You can't work. And then they quietly add, but if you look like you can, well, we might come after you. This is not what I would call a safety net, folks, for these men and women that come home who are broken and are looking to restore their lives and do everything that they're supposed to do per their own doctor's instructions at the VA where they're getting their services, medically necessary services. That's not a safety net. That's a freaking trap. And this is what they tried to do to Jeremy, what they're still trying to do to Jeremy. They're trying to trap him in the fact that he's helping other veterans outside the scope of the VA. So the question isn't whether Jeremy Harrell is perfect. The question is, what exactly are we asking our veterans to be? Broken enough to qualify for benefits, but not strong enough to even try again? Because I got to tell you, if that's the standard that this country is going towards, then the system isn't helping veterans recover. It's totally managing them, just like everything else Palantir Prison's trying to do. And that's something, folks, every American should definitely be paying attention to, because they're not going to stop with the veterans. They're not going to stop until it's you. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. God bless.
Food security or food sovereignty. Every time we buy food, we choose. Glyphosate exposure is exploding, and people are asking, why is food so expensive? This is why we do what we do. Organic fields, thriving orchards, the purest ingredients straight from the earth. From our farms to your family, we do the testing so you don't have to. You save time, you save money, and our regenerative farms continue to grow. It's time to remove what does not belong, rebuild with cleaner inputs. Support the farmers with the future in mind. This isn't a trend, it's a shift. We still have a voice. We still have a choice to vote with our dollars for a healthier America today. Tap the link.
Are you ready to take your health back? At VandersteelHealth.com, I trust Purium's powerful superfoods to fuel my body with clean, plant-based nutrition. And in a world filled with toxins, Biomedic is designed to help support your body's natural detox process, even from glyphosate exposure. Real nutrition, targeted support, no junk. Go to VandersteelHealth.com and take control of your health today.